Don't limit God when God's not limiting you. When I first understood this principle, two things increased in my life, and I'm believing for you that both are going to increase in yours when you see this, because it could be that God has more for you, that there's something He's wanting to give you. He's not withholding it, but could it be that we're limiting ourselves and what we're able to receive, even though God is not the one putting those limitations on us? If you're willing to stretch your capacity and break the limitations off of what is holding you back, then let's jump right into the first thing that increased when I realized this, and that was my prayer life. I saw this when God wanted to destroy Sodom and Gomorrah, told Abraham, and Abraham says, but what if there's 50 righteous people in the city? Will you spare it? God says, yes, for 50 righteous ones, I'll spare it. So Abraham pushes the envelope and says, forgive me for asking, but what about 45? God says, 45? Cool, I won't destroy them. Now Abraham gets a little hesitant. He says, well, I'm really sorry for asking. Please, I know I'm not really supposed to, but how about 40? And the process repeats back and forth all the way down to 10. But have you ever noticed these two aspects of the story? One, Abraham gets increasingly hesitant as he prays further and further. At first, he's like, well, with your permission, I'd like to ask. But then he gets all the way down to saying, I'm nothing but dust. I know I shouldn't even be asking you, but God, he's putting limitations on his prayer life that point number two, God is not putting. Never once did God say, Abraham, why you pushing me, bro? Like, back off. I'm going to do jujitsu on you. Don't mess with me, bro. Like, every time Abraham asked him, God was like, cool. Yeah, sure. Good idea. So watch this. The deeper Abraham got in prayer, the closer he got to God, the more defined and precise his vision, the more limitations he put on himself. What God does and doesn't do in our lives is directly linked to our prayer life. If you want to see bigger things in your marriage, your money, your ministry, then you've got to pray bigger prayers surrounding those areas. But too often we start approaching God with these limitations. Well, maybe my spouse isn't going to work with me on this, or maybe God doesn't want me to have more money, or maybe I'm not called to the ministry. Really, did God say that your spouse will not cooperate, that He does not want you to have any more money, or that you will never be involved in ministry? I get it, those thoughts are there, but who put them there? It's certainly worth considering, because sometimes we impose limitations on ourselves that God is not putting on us. Now, are there times God is going to say no? Yes, of course there are. But just be sure you're not putting a period at the end of your prayer when God is only putting a comma. Now, the second thing that increased when I understood this principle was my reliance on Christ. You see, when we start praying bigger, we start getting bigger, more responsibility, our capacity enlarges, and as our ability increases, so does our reach, our influence, our impact in ministry. Well, once we start moving in that direction, all of our mistakes and hangups become very clear to us. For example, if you'd asked me years ago when I was teaching in high school if I was a disciplined person, I would have told you yes. I thought of myself as self-disciplined, but when He called me out of that career into publishing books and traveling, speaking in churches and conferences, I would wake up in the morning and kind of get to work eventually. You see, it was easy for me to think I had discipline when I had to be at the school at 7 o'clock in the morning. But when it was all on me, that particular lack of character began to show even further. So as our prayers increase, our responsibility increases, and then that responsibility then reveals flaws in us that weren't evident before. Since these things were coming to the surface, I realized I wasn't as strong as I thought I was. So I start praying to get stronger. God, take this bad thing away from me and put this good thing in me. But then I realized the Apostle Paul asked God 3 times, Lord, take this thing from me. And God said, no, you know what? My grace is enough for you, because my strength is made perfect in your weakness. So now that I'm doing things which are exposing my weaknesses to a greater degree, I have to rely on God deeper than I ever did before. When you stop putting those limitations on yourself and the lid busts wide open and you start walking into your purpose and you have those children, or you start that business, or you get involved with that ministry, then the weight of the responsibility that you are taking on will then expose your weaknesses, and you're going to have to start saying, God, I need your help. I can't deal with this alone. I need your strength like never before. Because once we decrease the limitations, we increase our need to depend on God. So be sure, my friend, not to limit God when God is not limiting you. And I love going deeper into the things of God with you as the viewer, so I publish books, which I've linked down in the description below. Be sure to check those out and subscribe to the channel with the notifications bell turned on so we can catch each other in the next video together.